everyone. I once again welcome you to the exclusive session on being the biggest ally in the journey of inclusion. I'd like to thank our session sponsor, Pegasystems. You can post your questions on the chat window and our speakers will address them towards the end of the session. Today's topic is very special because we have two very special people with us to share their experience. To build an inclusive organization, we bring our best to work. This session is aimed at enlightening the audience on how both our speakers have demonstrated their own will to challenge status quo, defy stereotypes, and manage power structures that help them to rise to their fullest potential. They took on the responsibility for making changes that helped in curating a culture of inclusion and allyship at their respective organizations. The power of I is incredible, and it reminds me of my favorite road sign, U-turn. To me, there is nothing else that signifies the power of I better than that road sign, U-turn. Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." Both our speakers for this session have in their own way demonstrated this in their lives. Let me now introduce them to you. Umran Beba has over 35 years of work experience, and out of this, 25 years with PepsiCo, holding several senior leadership roles. She was the president of PepsiCo APAC region and more recently, the Global Diversity and Inclusion Officer for PepsiCo International. She is currently the partner at August Leadership, based in New York. I've had the honor to work with her during my stint with PepsiCo. Umran is named as the greatest living business minds of Turkey by the Forbes magazine. She has been featured in Fortune magazine 3 years in a row for the most powerful woman in business in the global list and has received numerous awards and rankings for being an inspirational leader, mentor, and diversity advocate. Over to Umran.
Hi, this is Umran Beba. It's a pleasure to connect with you today. I'm joining this call from a global location, and that has been actually my life. And throughout my journey of 35 years with corporate life and 25 years with PepsiCo, I always appreciated the power of diversity, but also power of I. When I studied in high school and college, I received financial support because it was needed at that point in time. And I always thought about it was so great to get this support, but then I never thought about how it's going to impact my life in the future and how I really wanted to return that back. But it happens naturally, I believe. And today I remember those days. And today I'm so happy to support young people in my different roles with the International Youth Foundation, with the Purchase College. So I always find that very, very fascinating, you know, whatever happens in our past, that gives us the power of doing something good and something better. And I believe it's very important to stop once in a while and reflect on our journey as a human being, as a professional, and understand our personal values, you know, how they have been shaped throughout the years. In 2006 and 2007, I attended a couple of development courses about authentic leadership. And after that, I really stopped and reflected and looked at my leadership values, passion, determination to achieve, giving support, getting support, listening, understanding, empathy, respect, trust, perseverance, and resilience. Each of these words, actually, they have a meaning, they have a story. Unfortunately today, I don't have that much time, But I would like to share some of my experiences, and I just want to share how it impacted my personal journey, but also, how I interacted with people. And sometimes it was not easy, as you can imagine, but when you believe in something, when you have the passion, I think you are going to get there. That's what I've learned. So out of 35 years, as I said, I spent 25 in PepsiCo. I started in marketing, HR, sales, and then I became a general manager in 2001. And it was really a very, very proud moment. I was expecting my first child. I was announced to be a general manager. Turkey went through a very difficult economic crisis. It was a tough year, but with the help of my manager, my peers, my family, I really had a fantastic year with a lot of learnings as a mother, as a business leader, and as a human being. And then my next role was managing, actually, out of Turkey. I'm originally Turkish. So out of Turkey, I was managing now East Mediterranean, all the Middle East countries, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. And when I started this role, I was the only woman in the executive room. I mean, of course, I was proud and happy, but it didn't feel right. So I had to understand why it's happening and how we can improve actually these numbers. So of course, I started talking to my CEO and head of HR, and I said, how can we take this forward and, improve? And the good news, they were supportive. Okay. So that's, I think, step number one. You think about it, you find your power, and you take the lead. Step number two, you talk to the leaders who can take, the journey ahead with you. That's done. Of course, then I had to understand, what were the reasons that it was not going forward, these numbers not, uh, being in a better place. So we had to talk to the woman and understand, what were the challenges. And at the end of the day, I think we understood there were 4 areas: work-life balance, culture, development, and communication that we have to focus on. It sounds simple, but it was not. It was not simple because at the end of the day, we had to change the culture or evolve the culture, and we had to give people a chance to understand each other, especially, what women are going through as they work, as they have their families, what are the challenges. And the whole idea of mentoring actually came very handy and powerful in that situation. It's kind of reverse mentoring also. We started as mentoring, and we, matched our women leaders with the senior leaders, and they had sessions. But what was very important here, the power of, I think, also reverse mentoring, to understand what the other person is feeling and going through and what we can learn from that. So it was very important, I think, to take the senior leaders with us, business leaders with us. And you always have people, who wouldn't agree with you or who wouldn't really feel it. They will say yes, but they wouldn't be, moving forward with you. So there is a lot of communication, formal, informal, one-on-one, and, take the others with you. That's the challenge in these kind of goals. If you want to move forward, improving your numbers, changing the culture, making the workplace a better place. At the end of the day, I think everybody has good intentions. It's not the point, but some people care more, some people don't care as much. And I'm sure they have reasons, personal reasons, but our job as leaders, when we feel this urge, how do you take the others with you? As I said, communication, communication, and communication. But it's not formal communication. It's formal, informal, one-on-one. They have to feel it. They have to find their own reason. Why this is important? Why do we need more women in business? And why do we need to change some of our policies, work-life balance, flexible working hours. Look at what's happening in the world. We have been discussing flexible work, flexible location for many, many years. And today, it's just part of our life. And it looks like it's working. And things will change for long, forever, most probably, after this unfortunate pandemic. But in the past, before we come to this point, we had to convince people, we had to convince leaders, we had to test it, we had to test it again, look at the results. And there was a lot of convincing. But at the end of the day, we achieved results. We improved our numbers. We quadrupled the number of women in business in executive roles in that geography of Middle East, and everybody liked it. It took some time. It took some convincing. But I think if people can find their own reasons to believe, that's very important, you know. You can't have a blanket reason. They have to find their own reasons to believe, to take action. And our role, I think, the power of I here is to make sure I can bring that out. I just go, talk, communicate, and bring that power of others out to take action, to move forward. And I have seen this also in my other roles, President of Asia Pacific. I wanted to have more women in general management. So it was not enough just to increase the number of women in executive roles, but we needed more women general managers. And at the end of the day, from 1, we went to 4, which was very important. But today, I still continue focusing on this item because with the great education the women get, they don't need to just sit in the functional roles. They can manage P&Ls, they can lead businesses. They have to understand their own power. So we started some programs in my last role in PepsiCo as the Chief Diversity Officer, and we called it General Manager Aspire. They needed to understand what a general manager is, what they do, and that you can also do it. You can become a general manager. You have to start thinking about it. You have to believe in yourself. And we also started programs like Global Coaching Circle. Let's hear the successes of role models. Let's hear the voices of men who are supporting the women's agenda. But in my last role, Chief Diversity Officer, gender was only one part of the equation. Of course, it was a global agenda. It was about race. It was about different abilities. It was about LGBTQ+. It was about many things, about differences, the power of differences, and how we can give stage to people to find their own power. And the collective power of all these differences, it's good for business, it's good for growth, it's good for innovation, and it's good for humanity. And our role as leaders, I think, is to find that power, bring it out, collectively make it a bigger voice, and create a better world. But it's not easy. You have to understand the challenges, and actually communication is key. And that communication cannot be just blanket communication. It has to be at the individual level. You have to understand the personal reasons of why and why not, and try to find the power of the positive reasons those people can take their agenda forward. So it will be very individual, you know, that journey will be very individual. And I think we have to find those individual reasons to achieve results as a team. And, you know, as I said, make the organizations more diverse, make the organizations more inclusive. And at the end of the day, I think it's about making the world a better place. So in my current role, I am a partner now in August Leadership. My mission is really, I want to spark, find that spark in people's actually lives, and to make them better leaders with purpose. So I want to find the best talent, I want to find the diverse talent and place them in the right organizations with the winning cultures. And at the end of the day, I want to create a spark in people's lives for them to grow and become better leaders with purpose. That's what I want to do. And I want to thank the organizers today to give me my voice to talk about power of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Umran, for setting the context. Your journey is indeed quite inspiring. Andrea Berna, who was listed to speak, is unable to make it due to some personal emergencies. I thank our next speaker, Amita, for stepping in and supporting this session. I'd now like to introduce Amita to you. Amita is Vice President, Site Head, Quality Assurance for Citibank, a seasoned technologist who is also an inclusion and diversity evangelist. In her own words, I quote, "I was a caterpillar who transitioned into a butterfly, and I identify myself as a human. It has been my mission and vision since then to help humans see humans by breaking their cocoons, which is filled with stereotypes, biases, and prejudices," unquote. Amita is also a TEDx speaker and an inclusion and diversity advocate to several MNCs. Her passion brews into conversations with and for women empowerment, and she has also been a speaker on various prestigious forums such as IIM Bodh Gaya, NASSCOM 2018, Out and Equal India Forum, SHRM 218, HR Infotech Annual Meet, Pune Connect 2019, to name a few. Over to you, Amita.
Thanks, Kannan. A very good evening to you all. Thank you for having me, and I hope all of you are safe, taking care of yourselves, because we are into this new normal, and that's where I think we are having this over digital platform. As you mentioned in the introduction, you know, I think I have read it somewhere, a quote by Catherine M. Valente, which says, "Metamorphosis is the most profound of all acts." And how true that is. I mean, all of us go through some sort of metamorphosis at various stages of our lives. My metamorphosis, if I need to talk about a little, for more than 2 decades of my life, I struggled with something which is medically recognized as gender dysphoria. So basically, gender dysphoria is where your biological sex is not well aligned with your psychological gender. Yeah, that's where then after understanding it, getting my family on board and stuff like that, I went through a journey of gender transition whilst working for my erstwhile organization. So gender transition involves legal, social, and medical transition. So that's what I've gone through whilst working for my erstwhile organization, whilst being in a leadership role. What do I do today? So as you mentioned, I'm vice president, I'm site head for quality assurance for a business line of a major bank. So the captive of a major bank. So I have a global team. You know, we work across NAM, LATAM, EMEA, APAC. You know, we are a bunch of SMEs. So we have expertise across product lines. Then we have expertise across technology. We have various tools that we work upon. So what I'm trying to mention here is a very typical routine kind of a life, because this is the life, or this is the job which brings food to my table. So, you know, typical working days where I have stress because of delivery pressures or timelines, issues around projects and stuff like that. So that's what consumes most of my time. So I am in a leadership role. Apart from that, mostly weekends is where my advocacy is what I indulge in. So my passion is also my advocacy. So through my advocacy, I hope that I can bring in changes, individual changes in terms of behaviors, understandings of people, as you mentioned, breaking those cocoons. And at the same time, I hope that it can lay the foundation for the systemic changes that need to happen in the society. Yeah. So through my advocacy, I have been speaker on various forums. I have been invited to various multinational organizations to, drive inclusion forward. What has been my observation? Because I think we really need to have these conversations. So more often than not, or at times, because I give access to certain personal aspects of me, because I give access to my journey, suddenly I am compartmentalized and put into a category. So my question is, did you even ask me? How do I identify myself? So, on all my legal documents, my gender is female because I wanted to fit into binary. That was my own choice. That's how my gender on my all legal documents is female. So when you are inviting an individual, let's say who has certain past, who is sharing, who is going ahead and sharing the personal aspects of life, you should not make decisions based on your perceptions or your unconscious bias. That's where you need to ask that individual, how do you identify yourself? Because a very relatable another example is, you see this effeminate colleague at the workplace and suddenly you build this perception he's gay. And that's where if you have an employee resource group which works for the LGBTI plus community, you might show the audacity of asking that colleague in pantry in front of 10 other people, why don't you join that ERG? I mean, don't make these assumptions. Don't let your unconscious bias drive yourself. Ask that individual, because we are talking about respect at the end of the day. We are talking about confidentiality at the end of the day. So behind the garb of inclusion, we need to cross-check. Are we compartmentalizing the people? I read this very good example somewhere. So diversity is about inviting to a party. Inclusion is about inviting to dance with you, and belongingness is about dancing together like nobody's watching. So the quest here or the vision here should be inclusion and belongingness, not only diversity. And that's where conscious cross-checking needs to be carried out in all the organizations, especially who are, driving or striving hard to inclusion forward. Are they really working towards inclusion and belongingness, or they are compartmentalizing the workforce? Now, another relatable example could be, let's say, we invite Sheryl Sandberg to talk. We write her achievements. We invite, let's say, Indira Nooyi to talk, PepsiCo. We talk about her achievements. We don't write a cishet woman. So when you are inviting Amita Karadkhedkar to talk, why do you need to write transgender woman, and that too without taking her consent or discussing? That is the example, or that is the compartmentalization which I wanted to mention. Yeah. And this is also somewhere linked with rainbow capitalism or tokenism. I mean, what we see, so, we have this Pride Month. So suddenly then there are these, panel discussions which are rampantly happening across all the platforms. So, of course, I'm not saying we don't need these panel discussions. We definitely need it because, conversations, communications, dialogues, as Umran also mentioned, communication, it's very much required. And of course, adequate representation from the adequate sections can only bring in the challenges and concerns and problems which we need to address to drive inclusion forward. So of course, these panel discussions, these dialogues are very much required. But at the same time, we need to look at going beyond that. That's where legal rights and protection at the workplace come into picture, which needs to be looked at through the lens of equality. So the organizations who are arranging these panel discussions frequently in the month of Pride every year, are you looking at your legal rights and protection at the workplace through the lens of equality? So the policies that you have towards your cishet colleagues, are you rolling out, or do you have the same policies towards the other section of diversity at your workplace? So let's say, for example, fire alarm system, right? So you have this loud fire alarm buzzing, in case of some unexpected incident. But what about those who can't hear, who are differently abled when it comes to hearing? Will they respond to an audio fire alarm, right? So that's where the legal rights and protection at the workplace needs to be looked at. Yeah. And it's somewhere also aligned with employee wellness. When we talk about employee wellness, we suddenly look at, mental health. Of course, that is very much required. But along with mental health, it's also emotional and physical well-being of every employee. So basically, individual employee wellness and group employee wellness. So group employee wellness is the culture of the organization. So you need to roll out based on the majority at the organization, but at the same time, your legal rights, your policy, your protection should also be considering every single employee of the organization who might not be in the majority. Yeah. And then more often than not, the question which is also asked is, how can we be an ally, right? So the first step here is ask yourself, do you want to project yourself an ally because you have these fears that you might be branded as LGBTI plus? If that's what your intent, then you have lost the battle there itself. Yeah. So once you rise above that, then of course your intention of being an ally needs to be celebrated. With that, maybe I'll share a short story because stories make more impact. It's called Starfish Story. Yeah. So one sunny morning after a storm, there was this old man who was walking by the beach. From a distance, he saw somebody moving like a dancer. After going closer, he realized there was this young girl who was picking up the starfish from the shore and gently throwing them back in the sea. So he asked, "What are you doing?" To which she responded, "It's sunny up there and the tide is going back. If I don't place these starfish back in the water, they'll die." So the old man laughed. "I mean, are you crazy? There are many miles of the sea and thousands of starfish. You can't possibly make a difference." To which the girl just smiled politely, gently bent down, picked up another starfish, threw it back into the ocean and said, "It made a difference to that one," right? So we are not talking about changing the whole world. As an ally, what we are talking about is just making the place which is next to you inclusive, just making the place next to you not hostile to that diversity that we have around us. Yeah. So with that, I'll pass it on to Kannan. Thank you so much. Kannan, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Amita. And that was quite an insightful conversation that you had. And I like you bringing in the concept of belongingness and inclusion along with diversity. And it all starts with us as individuals, So that's a great insight that you have brought into the discussion. We are now moving on to the Q&A. I have the first question that has already come in from Pavani Kondapalli. Thank you, Pavani, for the question. Since you have not addressed it to any single panelist, I would leave it open to both of you to answer this question. But it's a very tricky question, though. Do you honestly vouch for elimination of patriarchy? Does it matter to one in a corporate role? Were you affected by it at all? That's the question. So, Umran, would you like to answer this question first?
Yeah, I think I will say that it's about approaching every individual as an individual. It's about equality. So yes, there are cultures where it's much more difficult actually to change the game. Unfortunately, we go through that. But even in those cultures, there are ways to address it. I mean, I'm personally coming from a Muslim country, woman. But on the other hand, I was able to, go through the ranks with my education, with my confidence and belief. And I was lucky to work in organizations like PepsiCo and Colgate-Palmolive who respected that individual and equal platform. But of course, there might be organizations, unfortunately, the journey is still maybe didn't begin or just, beginning. And there are countries like, I remember, for example, our first childcare center was introduced in Pakistan, Kannan, you might also remember that. And the reason was really to help the woman to bring their kids to work, and it gives them a permission really to work with comfort for their families. In Saudi Arabia, for many years, we didn't have women coming to the workplace. So PepsiCo was one of those first companies introducing the suitable conditions for women to come and work. Of course, you have to respect the cultural elements, but also you have to push. You have to push some of those rules and make it actually addressing, as I said, the power of the individual in an equal atmosphere with, of course, inclusion and belonging. So that's what I want to say. And Amita, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, sure. So, somewhere what I think is it relates. So, of course, it has got two aspects. One is societal and one is corporate. And where it intersects, it's intergenerational trauma. What is intergenerational trauma, which is majorly observed in men? So growing up, because they have seen a housewife mother, they expect their wives to be housewives. Similarly, when it comes to workplaces, they find it, I'm just giving an example. This is not a generalization at all. So that's where they struggle to relate with a woman who is working, who is competing with them with the same skill set at the workplace, sitting next to them. Because of the intergenerational trauma, they find it difficult to digest because they have not been exposed to it. That's where when you want to fix this problem, it's all about rising above this intergenerational trauma, prejudices, biases, the box definition of normality, which we all come from. So right from childhood, if you look at fixing it from the societal aspects, it needs to be fixed right from the childhood in the education system. Likewise, when it comes to corporate sector, conscious efforts through mandatory training needs to be put into, and of course, technology is a great enabler, which is playing, of course, a very major role in breaking away and, these shackles and stereotypical definitions. So yeah, I think that's what I want to add.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example that you gave. And I think both of you are coming from a very similar kind of culture, but yet the experiences are very different. So that's adding a lot of value to the conversation. Thank you very much. There's another question to you, Amita, from Mahima Sharma. How can an allyship program be launched at an organization and what all can it entail?
Okay, all right. So thank you for that question. See, briefly I have addressed it. Now I'll mention other aspect to it. It's what we think ally is, something different. What we see company culture is HR. Company culture is putting rangoli on Diwali. Company culture is bay decoration on Independence Day or putting that tricolor flag on our cheeks. That's where we are misunderstanding it. Or maybe we need to understand it better. Company culture is beyond HR fringes and these, celebrations. They are of course required, but company culture is about daily interactions. Company culture is about daily communication. So being ally is investing conscious efforts in being inclusive in these daily interactions and communications. By communication, I mean all sorts of communication, written, verbal. So our email communication needs to be inclusive. For example, rather than writing hi guys, because guys is very much patriarchal, male centric kind of a word. So that's where using terms like hi folks, try to be inclusive in these written communications. Likewise, try to be inclusive in your verbal communications. So these are some basic steps rather than having a separate program. Then second step becomes these, training sessions, dialogues, conversations. That's where now allyship needs to be celebrated. So where we are creating role models, let's say out of various sections of diversity. Likewise, allies also need to be celebrated. Allies should take immense pride in being an ally. Yeah. And that's where, if they don't understand certain things, indulge in conversation. Don't shy away from asking somebody that, let's say you have this visible role model at your workplace, and I'm saying visible, out and proud role model, where you're not making any assumption, where your unconscious bias is not playing any role. Approaching that visible, out and proud role model, asking, I don't understand what LGBTI is all about, can you help me understand? Right now, what are the concerns of the community? What are the typical challenges they go through at the workplaces? And that's how, especially the leaders, especially the line managers, people managers, have to indulge in these conversations to understand what are the concerns these various individuals go through on a daily basis. And then based on that, the simple corrective measures in the daily interaction is what needs to be incorporated.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think both of you emphasize the importance of communication very well all through from the beginning. So that's really the key. Building on what you spoke just now, and Umran, this is to you. The question is from Luna Patnaik. The strong women leaders are seen as aggressive, and this many a times is not accepted even today by many men colleagues. However, a man having same qualities are considered to be a great leader. How and when this myth can change?
I talked about the authentic leadership. At the end of the day, if the woman, they cannot just reflect on their values and cannot find their authentic voice, they will look like aggressive. And unfortunately, it is not liked by man or woman, doesn't matter, because they just try to replicate a standard or an accepted situation or whatever. So you have to find your voice, authentic voice, based on your values. Yes, from time to time, you will be passionate, you will be voicing your concerns, but you can't always try to be like a man, or a prototype. I think that's wrong. That's wrong. And I totally believe that we should find our own voice. But how to change these also in the companies? I talked about reverse mentoring, understanding each other. And Amita mentioned about this whole curiosity, education, knowing about each other. Who am I? Who are you? We should have a conversation. And when you have those conversations, it's not anymore, an aggressive woman or a man, who's thinking you're an aggressive woman. The conversation, the curiosity, education, inclusive leadership trainings in the companies are becoming more and more these days, very widespread, and we should continue that. It's not only about online training, it's about, in-person conversations. And every manager makes, I think, the difference at the end of the day. I mean, it's the one-on-one situations, either make it or break it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Amita, you have a very wonderful comment from one of the participants. Her name is Aparajita. She says, Amita, you are awesome. What are the 2 or 3 tips on how people can start to challenge their biases?
Okay.
What baby steps can people take?
Sure. Another very, very good question and very important question. So, see, what is bias basically? Bias is our tendency of making snap judgments. So wherein our unconscious mind comes into play and we take decisions based on our unconscious mind, right? Mostly. And that is where the decisions are based on our perception, our prejudices, our box definitions. Yeah. So first step here is, which can really help, or which can really effectively work, is constantly revisiting your decisions, constantly questioning your decision. Like, for example, in hiring, if you have, let's say, finalized a candidate, don't just make that decision, revisit. Have you made the correct decision? Have you made the right decision? Question your own decision-making process. That way, you can see if you have made that decision based on your bias, okay? Secondly, educating yourself. Lot of times you don't understand that you are practicing bias because you have never been exposed to something like that. So for example, let's say, what I mentioned about the intergenerational trauma. So as you have always been seen men working at the workplace, you never seen a woman working. So you will never pay attention to the challenges that woman is going through at the workplace. That's where educate yourself. Third point is, which is about rising up. So let's say if I am exposed or I have been subjected to some sort of bias, the onus also lies on me. I need to stand up for my own self. If I think this is not what is right, this is not inclusion, I have been discriminated on this aspect, I need to stand up for my own self. I think these are some initial steps which can really, all of us can take and can help us rise above the biases. And of course, we can't really eradicate the biases. Let's be real. But we can invest conscious efforts to maybe reduce the intensity of the biases.
Yeah, thanks, Amita. That was really insightful. Any last comment from both of you? We are just going to wind up the session now. Any last comments from both of you?
Actually, I want to build on this comment about don't be a bystander, but be an upstander. I think we all have a responsibility. Organizations, yes, they will do the inclusive leadership training, unconscious bias training, and many more things. But at the end of the day, individually, we have a responsibility. Finding our own voice, making sure, our voice is heard, but also if we see something wrong, we have to be the upstander, not the bystander. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Thanks, Umran. Amita, last word from you.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is, on a concluding note, that don't just work or look at diversity as some tick which you want to meet. Look at diversity from all aspects. What's value add it's bringing it to your decision making process, what value add it's bringing into your businesses, how you're catering through diversity to all the sections of the society. And that's where then, as I briefly mentioned before, diversity, don't stop there. Your ultimate goal is inclusion and belongingness. That's what you need to constantly keep in mind and work towards inclusion and belongingness. Thank you.
Thanks, Amita. Thank you, Umran. Thanks, Amita. That was really
Thank you for
insightful.
having.
Thank you.
We come to an end of the session. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Please don't forget to share your experience on our events feed page and also on your social media platforms with the hashtag the power of I.